Okay, see how long kids stay outside while I make this intro. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Jocelyn, and we are going to be doing some freezer cooking in this video. I've been putting up meals over the last little bit because we have a new little one on the way, very soon actually. I am 40 weeks. 40 weeks. That's quite a milestone for me because I've never actually made it to 40 weeks before with all my past babies. This is number 7, so this is the first one to make it to her due date. So I'm kind of shocked. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I'm able to get a lot more work done and some more freezer meals put up in the freezer, which is kind of nice. So we're gonna keep this video going, and I'll just kind of compile all the past footage that I've gotten. And so I hope that you find this video helpful and that you can find some ideas of meals to make for your own family and for putting up in your freezers.
So we're going to be mixing up some pizza dough first. It's pretty easy, and then I can just stick it in the freezer and we can have a homemade pizza fairly fast. So here I just have some really warm water, not hot, just really warm, and then I added some yeast to it. I am making a quadruple batch, but I will link the recipe below so that you can make a normal size batch if you want to. I always double it though, and then I make half of this recipe into breadsticks and then half of it used for the dough for the pizza. Adding the sugar here so the yeast will poof up.
What are you making?
Pizza dough.
It really doesn't take long for it to poof up a little bit, and then you can add your other ingredients. It's really not picky. You can add it before or after. It's a no rise pizza dough recipe, so you don't really have to let it rise if you want to, but you can. I usually let it rise a little bit at the very end for about 15 minutes. So just mix in your oil and salt and give it a stir.
I can't believe this is pizza dough.
Italian seasoning is optional. I like to add a little usually. And then add your flour, and it's as simple as that until it gets to the right consistency. The recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour, but you will probably need a little extra for sprinkling and to keep your hands, coated with flour while you knead it.
I like it.
And you really don't have to knead it very long, just until the dough becomes dough, basically, just about 5 minutes, maybe even a little less at times if I'm in a hurry. That sight makes me happy. Doesn't it make you happy? It just looks so pretty and all rose up in the bowl. Okay, so here's the part of the video that you are not going to follow what I'm doing. I decided to wrap it up in plastic wrap this time to put it in the freezer, and this is what I always do when I freeze pie crust, but I just didn't take into consideration that this is pizza dough and it would kind of continue to rise, and I thought that if I stuck it in the freezer right away it would stop rising and then it would be fine, but it kind of busted out of that plastic wrap, so you're gonna have to wrap it some other way to store it in the freezer, and my suggestion would just be to put it in like gallon-sized bags so it has a little bit of room to grow, but it'll freeze up pretty fast anyway. But so on to the creamy lime chicken taquitos, which is one of our family's favorite meals. The kids just love it. They eat it up. So I cooked up some chicken in the oven, and I'm just going to shred it up, and I'm making a quadruple batch again so I can have 4 dinners instead of 1. This is the original recipe. I did hit it with the blender just a little bit at the end to get a little bit more shredded. First thing I do is just add the cream cheese to the chicken. And this is where I change the recipe quite a bit. I add quite a bit more cream cheese than is called for. Then you're going to add your green salsa. Add some chopped onion and your seasonings. I just added garlic, onion powder, chili powder, and cumin. So after you give it all a good mix, you're going to add some lime juice. And a good amount of cheese. Time to assemble them all. Just roll them up and stick them in the pan. You can add a little extra cheese if you want. This next step is an important one. I always brush the tops with oil. I'm using avocado oil here, but you could use whatever oil. And then you sprinkle a little bit of salt and it just makes them crispy and really tasty. So that one we were having for dinner, and then the next three I'm going to assemble are for the freezer. And for these, I do not brush with oil yet. I'll do that when I take them out of the freezer later. I do cover them with an extra layer of plastic wrap just for extra protection from getting freezer burn. I do plan on using these pretty soon, but just don't forget to take it off before you bake it. And this is what it looks like before you eat it. It's so good. You should try it, really. And my kids always like the lime slices along with it, and they squirt extra lime juice on top of them. So another idea for freezer food is just to cook up some taco meat. It's so easy to do, and there are lots of different ways to use it later on. I like to cook it up with some onions, and I use my own taco seasoning mix, which the recipe is right here for you. Just so you don't get confused, a capital T is a tablespoon and a lowercase t is a teaspoon. It's my own little code. All cooked up and ready for the freezer. It feels so good to have, extra dinners in there for when the baby comes. Next up is waffles. My kids love them, and I just got a new waffle maker, so I'm pretty excited to use it. I just used the Better Homes and Gardens cookbook for my waffle recipe, so I'll kind of browse over it here for you. It's pretty easy to do. I made this recipe times 6 today, so we'd have lots of extra food in the freezer. And the kids love them with blueberries best, that's for sure. These are so super simple to reheat using a toaster in the morning. I love it. Next up, we are going to make some sloppy joes, and I have my cute little helper here. She's going to help me cut up some green peppers. This is hands down my favorite sloppy joe recipe ever. It's Pioneer Woman, and I will put a link to it in the description so you can check it out. So I did 10 pounds of ground beef for the sloppy joes. Sure is nice to have a dairy farm in the family. We get lots of meat. So I just sauteed this up with all the recipe's ingredients, and I will have that link below, and then I stored it in the freezer. Next up, who doesn't love tater tot casserole? My kids do, that's for sure. I like to use my own homemade cream soup recipe for this, and I think it makes it taste so much better. To start out, I had gotten some chicken broth out of the freezer that I had already pre-made. You can just use canned chicken broth or whatever you need, but after that I just took it out and I sauteed the onions in some butter. In a separate pot, I have some ground beef cooking up, and I just added some onions to it for flavor. So the butter's all melted, and I added some mushrooms to the onions as well. Then you're going to want to add a thickener of some sort. I decided to use flour this time. I think that tastes better to me than like arrowroot powder or cornstarch. So flour it is, and then you just mix it up and make like a paste. Then you're going to want to add your chicken broth and bring it to a boil. In the other pot, when your ground beef is done, I just like to add like a mixed veggie to it and cook it all up. Keep stirring until your mixture comes to a boil and thickens up. So at the end, I decided to add some sour cream. If yours is too thick, you could just add milk instead, but you could really add whatever you want. So I just stirred in some sour cream this time. So you're going to want to add your meat mixture to the bottom of the pan. This night I made 2 pans for the freezer, and then the one 11 by 15 is for our supper that night. Then pour the cream soup mixture over that until it's covered. And I froze those pans just as they are. I did not add the tater tots yet for the freezer. I figured I can just throw those on later with some cheese before I bake them. I know some people like to add the tater tots and then the cheese on top, but I find that we like crispy tater tots, so I put the cheese on the bottom and then the tater tots on top before I bake it. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. And I hope that you just found some new ideas for freezer meals. So, God bless.